Back. My next guest served as the head speechwriter to former President Barack Obama. Since then, he founded the Crooked Media podcast platform and hosts Pod Save America and Offline with Jon Favreau. Please welcome to the Stephen A. Smith Show, the man himself, Jon Favreau. What's going on, Jon? How are you, man? Pleasure to meet you. How's everything going?
Pleasure to meet you too. I'm doing well. You know, it's election eve nerves, but other than that, I'm feeling good.
Well, I got to admit, man, you got a smile on your face. What the hell is the smile about it? Because everybody else in the world look nervous and what have you. You got this smile on your face is looking for. It's like you can't wait.
I have been in politics for 20 years. I've been doing campaigns since 2004. Won some, lost some, and I get so nervous before every single election day. And I decided that this time around, my anxiety is not going to change the outcome. So I might as well just be calm. And if if the outcome doesn't go my way, I have plenty of time to be miserable after the votes are counted.
I got you. That makes perfect sense. We're one day away from a consequential election, obviously. You've had a very unique vantage point serving in the Obama administration. Your thoughts on where the country stands right now?
I think it's pretty close. It's going to be a pretty close election. That's no surprise. That's what all the polls are showing. But look, I think here's how I see it. The Kamala Harris and the Democrats are facing a political environment that is pretty brutal, which is, post-pandemic, incumbent governments all over the world, incumbents have been losing, partly because of the post-pandemic sort of malaise hangover from inflation, prices still too high, immigration issues. And those are some headwinds that Kamala Harris and the Democrats are facing. That said, Donald Trump is, Donald Trump, and there's an anti-MAGA coalition in this country that has turned out since 2016 to be Donald Trump and Trump Republicans in every single election since 16. And he is pretty toxic to voters. And I think that if it turns out that Kamala Harris wins, it's going to be because Donald Trump is an undisciplined, extreme candidate that people do not want to see in office for another 4 years, and that women who are upset with the Dobbs decision and Americans who are very upset with Trump and the threat he poses for democracy are going to come out once again and turn out in big numbers and win a close election. So that's sort of how I see it. I see that the political environment is tough, but Trump presents a real opportunity for Democrats just because he is such a undisciplined, bad candidate.
What about the opportunity Kamala Harris presents to the other side when you consider the fact that she didn't endure a primary, that ultimately Biden had to step away on July 21st, and a lot of people on the right are saying it was essentially handed to her, and you think about the war in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, and you think about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or Hamas and Hezbollah and all of that stuff, and now Iran is in the mix, and Trump, with his cold words or with his rhetoric is like, do you really want her? Are you sure you want her instead of me? What about the threat to her winning the election that may pose?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge she faces, right? And look, I do think when you talk to voters who have not made up their minds yet, it's not necessarily that they're buying into what Trump and the Republicans are saying about her, but they just don't know enough about her, is what you'll hear from people. So they'll say, oh yeah, she just sort of came out of nowhere, and I don't really know what she stands for. And I was knocking on doors in Las Vegas over the weekend, and I talked to someone who works at one of the hotels there, and I asked her if she was voting, and she's like, yeah, I think I'm going to vote for Trump. And I was like, oh, well, why are you voting for Trump? And she said, well, I don't know much about Harris. Like, she just appeared out of nowhere. And so I started talking about Kamala Harris's record, not just as vice president, but when she was attorney general. And I said, she took on these big banks. She got homeowners, a lot of money from the banks who they were trying to screw homeowners over. And then there were these for-profit colleges that scammed veterans and college kids. And she won money from them too. And then all of a sudden this woman starts being like, you know what? I didn't know all that about Kamala Harris. That's pretty good. I'm gonna look up some more information on her. Maybe I'll vote for her now instead of Trump. So those are the decisions that the undecided voters are actually making right now. And those of us who pay super close attention to politics, like we hear the Democrats argument and the Harris argument a lot, and we hear the Trump argument a lot, but most people who aren't paying close attention to politics they're just sort of tuning in now and making up their minds. So that's there's probably 4 to 5% of voters in the swing states who are truly undecided, and there's maybe about 10% who are what we call persuadable voters, meaning they might be leaning towards Harris or leaning towards Trump, but can still have their minds changed.
You were the primary speechwriter of Obama's iconic 2009 inauguration address. That was a fabulous speech, no question about that. You two come from vastly different upbringings as well. How involved was he in handing over the authority of his words to people like yourself? How lenient was he in that regard?
Well, it's funny because when I started speechwriting for him when he got to the Senate in 2005, I had been a speechwriter on John Kerry's campaign, and when I sat down with him for the first time, he said, I write all my speeches myself, and I don't really think I need a speechwriter, but my communications director says that I'm going to need to learn to work with someone because now I'm going to be too busy to write all my own speeches. He's like, and you seem nice enough, so let's give this a whirl. So I think at first he didn't think that he was going to need a speechwriter, but as he got busier and busier, I got to really know him, and I got to sit down with him. And of course, he's written 2 books, and so I didn't just learn like how he writes and how he speaks, but I sort of ended up learning how he thinks. And eventually, over time, he started trusting me with writing his speeches, and that still meant that when there was a big speech, he would get really involved, and he and I would go back and forth on drafts, and he would do a lot of writing on his own. He would like handwrite pages and pages of speech writing and then give it back to me, and then I'd have to incorporate it into the draft. But the two of us got to know each other and went back and forth, and I think the key to really speech writing well for someone is to not use them as like a vessel to talk about what you want to talk about, but to really get inside their mind and to really try to empathize with what they want to say, what their life experiences are, and how they want to communicate.
I have to ask you because I think that Obama is one of the great speakers in American history. When this man gave a speech, when he still gives a speech, in most instances, if not all, they're incredibly riveting. And you being a speech writer for him, you'd obviously have a clue about who needs more help than the others. I think that in this particular election, it's clear who needs more help than the other because I watched Trump ramble on and on and on, put me to sleep during the Republican National Convention. But nevertheless, there have been times where you've looked at Kamala Harris and she's done an exceptional job giving a speech. Yet in the same breath, people have challenged the authenticity of it all because of the manner in which it was delivered. Is it really her, or is it the speechwriter? Is it the Democratic Party coming across this way? How do you feel about her as a speech giver, and how glaring is it, if at all in your mind, are the words of others being put in her mouth?
So I know her speechwriters quite well. Her head speechwriter was the first person I hired on the Obama campaign, and so I know what their process is like. And she's also someone who really digs in on a speech as well. I think what's different this campaign is because she's only had 90 days as the candidate. It is such a tightrope that she has been walking, right? Like everything has to go right for her. I mean, you brought this up earlier, right? Like Joe Biden is an unpopular incumbent president. Most candidates have a year to do interviews and do speeches, and you practice and you screw up and you get better and better, and then finally when everyone starts paying attention, you've had enough practice. And she just was like shot out of a cannon with 90 days to go. And so I think in her speeches they sound sort of more on message than you might expect from someone who's run a whole campaign, because she just doesn't have that much time and she has so much to do, right? She has to define herself. She has to remind people of the stakes. She has to talk about what she wants to do, and she has to talk about what Trump will do if he wins again. And she's doing all this in the glare of the national spotlight while she's giving speeches, doing interviews, doing all the rest of it. So I think that the speeches are probably more tightly structured and there's less room for like improvisation, probably because she doesn't want to screw up, because she knows that one misstep or stumble here and Trump could win. And I think she feels the weight of that acutely. I can tell how the responsibility she feels. So I think that there is an element of like playing it safe, only in that, like, you're not going to start thinking, okay, what kind of interesting argument do I want to make this time? Because you're like, all right, what is the most important thing I want to tell people? What is the message I need to hammer home? And how do we just go win this thing?
I got a couple of more questions, about a few more questions actually before I let you get on out of here. Number one, I just wanted to remind the audience you co-founded the progressive political platform Crooked Media in 2017 with 3 other Obama staffers. And then I'm looking at Crooked Media. It has more than 40 shows and engages directly in political activism, according to my research, including advocating for center-left policies and candidates. Billionaire George Soros, liberal billionaire, has a minority stake in the company. Here's my question to you. If half the country is conservative, how does anything get accomplished in a divided America? Especially, I mean, when you consider, again, you know, you got y'all are liberals, and you're dealing with a bunch of conservatives right now, and times seem to be crazy. I imagine that in today's generation, it's harder than ever before to get anything done. How do you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, the country is, like you said, it is divided. And I think my view on this, and I think this comes from having a campaign background and especially working for Barack Obama, is, you know, even though we're a left-leaning media company here at Crooked, my goal when we're talking to people, when we're putting out content, is to try to persuade people. And so, you know, people know that we're liberal, right? Like, we're not trying to hide it, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to work.
Can I
Sure.
pause you? You're talking about getting things, you know, why would you call yourself crooked? And how do you think that's going to help you get things done? I'm just interested in that. I mean, it just threw me off. It just threw me. I was like, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I hope I'm reading this right. Is this true? Is it Crooked Media? I mean, that name. I'm just, you just talked about getting things done, you know, and convincing an inordinate amount of American citizens to flow along with you all, but you call yourself Crooked Media. Sir?
Well, that was our tongue-in-cheek name that we gave ourselves in the wake of Trump winning in 2016. That's when we founded the company. So Pod Save America is our flagship podcast, which is, you know, probably, and we do Vote Save America. That's our outreach and mobilization that you talked about. So those names are a little easier probably than Crooked, but one of the most important things about this company is we want to use humor. So because we do think that, like, you know, when you go to someone, you're trying to convince them and you're just yelling at them all the time, or you're just assuming you're right, all that kind of stuff. It's tough. And so I do think you need some humor. You need to be friendly. You need to show empathy to people. You need to be understanding. You need to listen to people. Those are all, I think, strategies to try to persuade people, because you're right. If we're not persuading people and we're just yelling, our talking points, then we're never going to break the division in the country. We're never going to get anything done.
What is your closing pitch to voters who are still undecided one day before this election?
My closing pitch is, whatever you may think of Donald Trump's first term, the Donald Trump that would return to the White House is completely different. He has become more extreme. The people who used to work for him, even 4-star generals, even conservative Republicans, are trying to warn us that he is more unhinged than ever. And the people around him in the next White House are going to be some of the most extreme people who've ever worked in the government. And they are going to want to institute a national abortion ban. They're going to want to slap a 20% tax on everything we buy that's imported. They want to give a huge tax cut to rich people. That's the entirety of his economic plan. For everyone thinks he's good for the economy. He's not putting more money in your pocket. He's going to take money out of your pocket. And he's going to try to take away your health care and prescription drugs as well. Kamala Harris is, when she was Attorney General in California, she fought for people, and she took on big, powerful interest banks, for-profit lenders, and she did it on behalf of working people. And she has an agenda to actually lower costs for people, whether it's healthcare, whether it's food. And she also wants to make sure that we have reproductive freedom again in this country, because right now 1 in 3 women are living under a Trump abortion ban. And so to me, it's an easy choice. Even if you're a Republican, even if you don't usually vote for Democrats, Donald Trump, he's in it for himself. He's not in it for you. He's never cared much about anyone but himself. And Kamala Harris is the better choice.
Last question. With everything that you just said, if Donald Trump were to win this election, what possible hope would folks on the left have moving forward if their ingrained belief is exactly what you described, and as a result of it, that's what they feel they have to look forward to over the next 4 years? How you overcome that?
Well, I would say that there's two responses to a Trump victory, right? One is to give up, sit back, and say, you know what, this is what I have to look forward to the next 4 years. I don't want to do anything about it. I want to just sit here and unplug. And if we do that, you can guarantee that not only will the next 4 years be bad, everything that liberals don't want, but that the 4 years after that will be bad too. Because if we just give up, they're going to win. If, on the other hand, we respond by saying, okay, this is a divided country, and we have to go figure out how to persuade people and change their minds so that for the next election, that we can actually win, and that it's possible to change minds. And the reason it's possible is because the country is so closely divided on a nice edge that just a couple thousand votes in a couple swing states can change an entire electoral outcome. And so if you want to quit and you want to give up, that's fine. But if you actually want to work for the future that you believe, then you got to keep going, and you got to get involved, and you got to go out and talk to people who might not agree with you.
John, I got to get on out of here for now. I need a favor because you're somebody I know I'm going to enjoy talking to a lot about this country moving forward. And I really, really want to have you back on specifically after the election sometime over the next few days or so. I can't wait to talk to you once the outcome is decided. I can't wait to talk to you more about Pod Save America because it's called No Bullshit Conversation about Politics. And I love no BS. So I love all of that.
I know you do.
I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for coming on, but I want to emphasize that I'm really looking forward to talking to you again in the near future and having a lengthier conversation about where you think this country is going after we know who's going to be in the White House come January. All right?
That sounds good. I'd be happy to. I'd love to come back.
Man, thank you so much. I appreciate the one and only Jon Favreau. You can catch Pod Save America and Offline with Jon Favreau wherever you get your podcast.